Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Last week, Tantrum had its second fight against Lucky. And so this week, Aren will be talking to me and Alex about how we felt going into the fight, coming out, and sort of our plans. And so with that, Aren, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so first question, we've done some Instagram questions. We'll have some of those at the end. What was the config? What was the thoughts going into the fight?
Yeah, so Lucky is a flipper. And for us, Tantrum actually got eliminated last season because Endgame had us upside down on our backs and we were unable to self-right ourselves. So fighting a flipper, being eliminated last season from self-right not working, I think there was a little bit of pressure, hoping that sort of all the work that we had put into redesigning the self-right would be worth it. So like last year, some of you may know, the receiver for the self-right went down due to a separate issue. And so this year, in order to improve reliability, every single motor has its own receiver, including the self-right. So if our other mechanisms go down, let's say our weapon stops working, something's going wrong in that system, the self-right is sort of more independent than it was last year, hopefully making it more reliable. And here I have a picture. You can see, and Lucky did indeed get us on our back and did get some really incredible flips in the beginning. And this here is a picture pointing to our self-right mechanism, which is driven by a planetary gearbox. And the last stage is a chain and sprocket that just goes out to this tube. And when it spins, it sort of is a sense arms that lift us up off our back.
Alrighty, and then so when that actually failed, what failed?
Yeah, so some of you may not have noticed from the episode itself, but it was actually a pretty close call against Lucky because you can see in this picture here, our sprocket actually broke when we were flipped on our back, and also when we were sort of being jammed against one of the corner walls. And obviously that was pretty precarious, and it actually happened before we were stuck on the wall. So when we were stuck on the wall, sort of before Lucky came over and knocked us off, our sprocket was broken, which is why we weren't able to use our self-right arm to get ourselves off the wall. So any sort of momentum you saw was actually the punch going back and forth, trying to get up energy. And obviously, who knows what would have happened either way. Lucky came over and knocked us off. So yeah, that's what happened with our sprocket. So that was actually quite scary after the match. We were like, oh my gosh, like that could have been really, really bad. It was, yeah.
Yeah, and then so one of the fun things is like watching the fans' response to this has been like, oh, they locked him off early. And like there's a whole lot of things that were happening. If you want to dive into any of those deeper, Alex.
Yeah. I mean, like how it was edited, presented to the viewers, right, is that, Lucky came and knocked us off and kept the fight going when, one of the things that they didn't show was Mark's interview at the end. And, and a part of our interview as well, where we're talking about, the punch was wiggling us off the edge, and to the extent to where their driver said, hey, this is a free shot, we're going to go take it. And after the fight, we noticed, the chain had broken. And so if he got us upside down in that free hit and didn't write us again, we would have been done, like officially done, not just stuck. We would have been completely out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the conversation of like, oh, if they would have left him up there, got counted out. I'm like, I think it was a better call. Like, I agree with their call to go for the hit.
Right.
We also saw the debut of Team Seems Reasonable's tiniest attribute.
Yep. We added Nugget this year to the repertoire of robots, and to some success. He did something in the arena. But here's an internal view of Nugget and a little bit of info about this. Will Stanley and James Doherty, our two youngest members of Seems Reasonable, did all of the work on Nugget here, and it's definitely one of the most power dense robots that you'll see in the competition. Has a ludicrous amount of magnet force to the point where it's driving on walls and it can drive upside down on ceilings and stuff. But the goal here obviously was to try to high center robots, just like Ginger said in our pre-fight interview. And so that takes a mighty drivetrain and little tiny package, and that's what Nugget was. And so while it didn't do as much as we'd hoped during the match, it did have a few shining moments, and it looks like it helped sway the match in our favor. So
I also got some decent airtime once.
Right. There was twice in the match where Nugget was actually magneted to the front of Lucky, and that was probably my favorite part of the fight.
Nugget was riding on Lucky's front wedge. That was super
Yeah.
cute.
Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, alrighty. So we have a few after pics of some of the other damage Tantrum sustained, thanks to our awesome team photographer Steve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
Here's
one of the
the
tiny
here's the tiny fists. We actually printed them out of TPU plastic this year, and just printed a whole bunch of them. You can see the infill there, but this one scraped across the ground and got some road rash. But yeah, they're all just 3D printed, and it's a really complicated model to try to machine like we used to do. And so printing them now into a rubber that gives some level of also impact absorption is also nice. Look out for this one on eBay here pretty shortly, where we're gonna be doing just like last year and eBaying the fists and wheels from the fight here. And so take a look for that.
Yeah, and
Alrighty. Yeah, one of the other things that happened is a fun, I would say, failure unique to linear sliding weapons. If you want to look at the hard stop one, Ginger.
yeah, for sure. So something else that happened in this fight is when Lucky got on top of us, it actually caused our whole weapon to shoot forward in the linear slide, and that impact cracked the hard stop of our rails. And this piece is missing here, but it's supposed to be a rectangular shape, and you can sort of see the crack right there where it just totally cracked and came forward. Luckily, it didn't fall all the way off. There's screws that also secure it from down here. And this is also more TPU that's meant to absorb some of that impact. But this was quite unfortunate because one of the things we fixed from last year was making these rails stronger out of S7 tool steel. And they're not the easiest to make. They're very hard to get aligned. We were working with Haas a lot at the event, sort of playing with those, trying to get them just right. So that was definitely unfortunate. But we were able to make just thicker TPU soft stops that went in front of the hard stop, and that definitely helped a lot later on. So that was another failure that happened.
And then I'm going to plug in one of the questions we got from Instagram, which was, did Tantrum have different size or weight drums this season?
Yeah, so Tantrum actually has the exact same weapon this season as it has had since season 4. So this was sort of its third BattleBot season, fourth if you include KOB. And so our weapons have been through a lot. They were actually made by E2E, one of our amazing sponsors that has amazing machining capabilities. And they're super expensive, like maybe 800, maybe more per weapon. So it's definitely not something we want to remake from year to year because there's no reason to. They're still in pretty good shape. But here we have sort of a picture of some of the damage that the tooth has started to see.
And for reference, that's 800 for like material and hardening, not the awesome
labor,
work,
right.
not the awesome work E2E did as far as actually their EDM'd profile and then post machined when hard. So like they're amazingly balanced, very nice weapons.
Yeah.
And S7, I don't think we mentioned that earlier, but they are S7.
Yep.
So
So anyhow, maybe it's time for a new one. Maybe. Maybe you'll see. We'll see. No spoilers.
Checks bank account for team.
Yeah, right.
Anyhow, sorry, go on.
Alrighty. So what was the crew up to immediately after this fight?
So the broken sprocket you saw, that is something that we don't want to happen again, obviously. And so we had a couple different directions in terms of how to resolve that problem. If you want to pull up the guard photo. So we added a makeshift guard. One of the things that it gets talked about a bit, but most people don't realize is how much does change in robots during the season. You show up with a robot, but you still like run into things like this, right? You didn't think that we were gonna shatter the final drive sprocket on the self-rider. And so we had to come up with something, and it's not the prettiest, but it worked really great. And
It's
David,
gorgeous.
it's gorgeous, right? It's form over function, right? Like something like that, or function over form. It worked great, and David welded this up, bent everything up, and did a great job in making something that helps resolve that problem. The other thing, so these sprockets also actually have built-in rubber isolation mounts, and so that's part of why it did break. It had a lot of geometry that wasn't really conducive to transmitting that load with the material that we selected. And so we actually went out and machined some steel ones instead of the 7075 ones that we had against Lucky. And so in our next fight, you'll see a steel version of that same sprocket. And, we're hoping, that fixes the problems. So.
Yeah, alrighty. And then I think we're going to jump to some more of the Instagram questions. One of them was, and we failed to cover this in our recap video for Malice and the Rusty fight as well. What happened to Tantrum's weapon?
Yeah, so Tantrum's weapon, as we all know, is unique because it runs on a very exciting linear slide. That is our punch. And that extra degree of freedom is quite the evil little spirit, as you may know. And one of the things it does is it causes pinch points. And, the weapon has to spin, and we run it off of a hub motor that actually sits right inside of this. The motor's inside, you can't see it, but I swear it's in there. And for evidence, you can see the wires coming out and snaking around the back. And so that means every time the weapon shoots forward and it comes back, those wires are bending and they're moving dynamically sort of inside the robot. And if not managed properly, we sort of call it our rolling loop. Here's sort of a picture of what that business looks like down there. And if it's not managed properly, it can pinch and cause the wires to short together, which will cause it to sort of not be able to spin up anymore. And that is what happened in our fight against Malice, unfortunately. So we sort of pinched ourselves there, and it was unfortunate. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to clarify. In this photo, the rolling loop is the part with the braided. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so it is fine. It's fine in this photo. This is how it should look, but when it gets messy, it comes out sort of frayed. The sort of insulation around the wires are all meshed together. It's not as pretty. So
it's definitely been a fun one to test as far as like, oh, at home it plays happy, and then as soon as you're in a match and starts flailing around, oh, it came out pissed again. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So some of the season 5 to season 6 updates were definitely constrained as far as we wanted to use a lot of existing hardware and retrofit it, which meant trying to update that rolling loop did not have adequate space. Yep. So that happened at least once. All right, I have some other questions. What voltage does Tantrum run at? And did we improve our batteries during off season to prevent another Valkyrie loss?
Yep. So we run a 12S system, so 48 volts. And what we did from last year, we talked about it a little bit last year, but from the Valkyrie fight to every other fight last season, we took our batteries and swapped them for higher capacity batteries. So we had a lot more power in the robot, so we would never run into a dead robot situation like we did against Valkyrie ever again. And so we actually used the same batteries from season 5 as we did here in season 6, but the placement was changed. And so we did change quite a bit of where things are inside the robot, but it's all the same batteries. So it's just the upgrades that we did last year. And that was when we removed the original flamethrower system and arms in favor of having the weight for the batteries. So. But then this year we decided to switch to the flamethrower arms for Nugget for this fight, as you can see. But,
All right. Next question is why not rocket fists to fire at the opponents?
That's a good question. We'll look into it for next year, but there are certain entanglement rules that might get in the way. We'll look into it and see what production says.
Alrighty, and get your thoughts on this, the last ones. Do we have thoughts about facing Defender, Ginger, or thoughts about having a rematch with Tombstone?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, the Vasquez brothers are and have always been an incredible team. They're great drivers. Defender's a control bot, and we like to think that Tantrum is a control bot too. But I don't know. I think after Dylan's performance in our first 2 fights, I think we can take Defender, I think maybe if they get lucky, they could jam their gripper sort of into our punch. That could be interesting. Our rolling loop might suffer. But no, I think it would be a fun match. It would be a driving match for sure. I feel like that would be definitely an exercise in driving and using the box, and it would be really cool to see how sort of both robots use the various arena hazards. So yeah, that would be my take on the Defender fight.
All right, and Tombstone.
Alex,
how do you feel about that one?
I'd love to
You were
fight
there.
Tombstone
Yeah.
again. Yeah, you know, one of my favorite memories, one of the few good memories of season 3 was seeing our little plucky robot get demolished by a tombstone and seeing that fist fly through the air and into the pipe. And so,
I actually still have this. This Tombstone push strike toy was on our robot in that fight.
Yeah, we
and
forgot
I
it
still
on
have
there.
it.
No,
No, it's just taped on the flipper tip.
right.
Yeah.
But yes.
So yes, I would love to fight Tombstone again. I mean, I think a lot of people would like us to see, you know, like us to fight Tombstone again. It's like one of those things where you can see the progression of the sport, right? And to see like Tantrum's rise to power, right? Getting top 4 last year. It's a whole different robot that you aren't going to be able to say who's going to win versus Tombstone or Tantrum anymore. But before it was, you know, just a joke bot, right? You get just demolished, and now it's, you know, who's actually going to win. That is one that I look forward to.
I think also just simply being able to go into the fight and feeling like there's a chance and feeling like it's a true matchup. No, I mean, like, it's exciting, right? Like,
right.
I think that's like a really big deal, and it shows just how far and just how much work every single person has put in. So, I mean, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I definitely still appreciate the chunk of episode 4 where Ray is talking about, you may say I don't have it anymore, but every single person in here is going to tell you I hit hard. So it's
right.
Yeah, I tend to believe him on that one.
Right. Yeah, you know, after season 3, like, not only was the fist flying through the air, but that was, you know, we had thicker armor than half-inch AR 400 as opposed to the thinner armor that we have now. And we're still one of the most heavily armored robots here. But like back then we were, you know, objectively the most heavily armored robot, and that armor still potato chipped.
Yeah.
So.
All right, that's the questions I have from that list. And feel free to leave comments if we missed anything for the particular Lucky fight.
Yeah. And as usual, thank you so much to all of our sponsors who make this possible. And we could not be here without them. So we really appreciate all of their support. And finally, if you are interested in poker chips or shirts or anything, we do have a website for merch, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, so on. It seems reasonable everywhere. That's who we are. We make robots. We do things that seem reasonable. They're not really reasonable. And yeah, thank you so much for your support, and keep watching BattleBots. And we're super excited to watch the rest of the season and see Blip's second fight.
We'll see you in a few weeks.
All right.
Sometime.
Bye.